do? I think I'll do this. I call these live updates. Oh, I don't even know if I have that. There was just a few things I could have spoke about. You know, today I was driving. I'll mention this real quick, and it does have to do with something that was a bad decision that our community made. But I was heading into town, and there's a truck behind me, a red truck, and it sure looked like there were cop lights on the vehicle, like flashing, like blue and red. And the vehicle was behind me, and I thought, is this some one of the unmarked cop cars that is trying to pull me over? Because that was one of the new things the community passed, which was a huge mistake, because there have been people that were stopped in the past just by a vehicle with a cop light in it. And a lot of the people, women, were afraid that at night, I just came to my mind, there was a captain at the firehouse one night. I won't give his name. It didn't happen at work, but he was in a club in town. And some people in Kingsville, they tried to pull him over. And they were not cops, but they had fake lights. They were going to rob him. And he told us like the next day. Then he took off. So it's a mistake that we have done this year. But I thought, oh, this vehicle might be an unmarked car trying to pull me over. So I went slow, you know, maybe 50. And the vehicle stayed behind me at 50. And I'm thinking, is this an unmarked cop car trying to pull me over? Because the lights looked that way. And then the vehicle, I went into the left, and maybe the vehicle went into the left. And now I want to know, do you want me to pull over or not? And then the vehicle went slow. And then finally the vehicle kind of passed me up, and there was a lady in the vehicle, and you could see maybe she was upset, like, oh, I was going slow. And of course then I'm assuming this has maybe happened more than once, and she probably realized, yes, it's these lights. You need to change those lights. There were those particular, whatever the name is for those lights. But I had in my mind, because we have more cars now that are basically doing that for. The other thing I'll mention on the update, last night on the news, and it's somewhere here in the paper, but I'm not sure if, oh yeah, it's right here. Last night on the news they mentioned, the local news mentioned, the police are asking for the community's help if they spotted a particular person. And they gave the name last night and all, but they didn't say why. And I knew it was the man who is now missing as a key witness in a very tragic, terrible murder case of a woman by the name of Naomi Villarreal. And her boyfriend is accused of killing her and then burning her body in a barrel right along one of my prayer spots. But today the Corpus paper had it. It's right here. And it admitted, I don't know why they didn't admit it last night on the news, but this is the man, and it says if anybody has seen him, it's for that case. They didn't say last night it was for that case, but he's the key witness, Kevin Miller. Whether that man is still here, whether that man is still alive, but that it's a very serious murder case. Why they did not have tabs on him? Because the trial's now been postponed, and one of the statements was, like a few months ago, or when the trial was postponed, that they'd hate to, like, lose this case. Of course you'd hate to lose this case. When my friend Dirk stabbed another friend by the name of Tennessee, I helped Dirk because he was in the county jail waiting to go to trial for assault with a deadly weapon. And I visited the other friend, Tennessee, when he was in the hospital. Very bad stab wound. Almost died. But then during the time, Dirk's lawyer knew I was helping Dirk, and so his lawyer was Don Edwards, court-appointed lawyer. And Dirk, I visited Dirk. I took care of his dog, Gunner, as he's sitting in the county jail for about 8 months. And the lawyer asked me a few times, because I knew the people from the street that might have had to be witnesses, and either way, I told the lawyer at one point, because I was helping them, and he called me, do you know if this person is at Timmons or whatever? I said, well, let me ask you this, because Dirk would ask me, he'd call me up on the phone, he said, no, John, I'm going to stick to my story, which was somewhat of an unbelievable story, but I said to the lawyer at one point, I said, it looks like the victim, Tennessee, has fled the state. I mean, that's what I heard. As far as I know, I was honest with the lawyer. I said, and even though I don't believe the story that Dirk has told, that he fell on the knife twice, I said, let me just ask you this. I said, if Dirk sticks to that quite unbelievable story, I said, but if you don't have the victim in the case of Tennessee here, I said, it seems like maybe there would be no case. He said, oh no, his lawyer, Dirk's lawyer, said, oh no, there's a case, no matter what. And he was trying to get me to convince Dirk to plead to like 2 years in jail and felony assault. But at one point, I kind of felt maybe the lawyer had lied about something. And I told Dirk, I said, no, just do, on the phone, I said, whatever you think you need to do, go to trial. Sure enough, Dirk got out. The lawyer lied to me. That upset me. Now, I'm not saying Dirk should have gotten off scot-free, but the lawyer lied. He was more like in this small-town team of they did what they wanted. This witness that's missing in this serious case, that's a big thing. That's a big problem. Yesterday, or I have a post coming up tomorrow, I don't want to go too long. But in the Roy Moore, he's a man running for the Senate, Republican out of Alabama. Many accusations that women made against him, which I pretty much kind of believed them. But I heard a radio news clip. I didn't check the news. But one of the girls said when she was younger, he kind of like did something to her or whatever, and that she never had seen him later. Then she produced a yearbook and said Judge Roy Moore signed her yearbook. That's fine. I kind of believe she was telling the truth. But the signature in the yearbook now said Judge or Roy Moore, D.A. And Roy Moore, his attorney, I heard a statement from his attorney. He said, first of all, they're saying that's fake. That girl wrote that in her yearbook. Second, that girl lied because Judge Moore, when he was a judge, was the presiding judge over her divorce. And in the divorce, he obviously didn't remember, but this girl must have remembered. And in the divorce decree, this is what Roy Moore's lawyer said, that he wasn't the DA, even at the time that he supposedly signed her yearbook. He was an assistant DA, but he would never sign DA, but his assistant in his office, the name is Delbert, the name is D.A. And so in the divorce decree that this woman who said she never saw him again, but she did, she was in his court years later for the divorce decree, and maybe she was upset about however, and so in her decree it has Judge Roy Moore's name with the signature of his assistant, the initials, D.A. And maybe if she faked this and she tried to rewrite his name in her yearbook, she just figured she would put it exactly how it was on her divorce decree, not realizing that D.A., according to this lawyer today who spoke, wasn't Roy Moore's signature district attorney. It was Roy Moore and then his assistant's initials, Delbert Anderson or whatever, something like that. If that's true, then you don't just take that slightly. Okay? If it's true, you don't take that slightly. Because I believe that lady, and that caused me to question. Now, this is just a little update on some of that little local stuff I wanted to talk about. There's many people. I'm seeing all the different cases and all the things, but there was a word I was going to think of the other day, and I thought if I think of it, I'll talk on it. It's a theological Bible scholar used this word. Okay, I'm not saying I'm a scholar. Theodicy, not the Odyssey. Okay, but Theodicy. I guess it's just one word. Theodicy. What Theodicy means is the question of why is evil exist. And it's a legitimate question. People that question Christians, question the faith, apologetics and all, one of the arguments that they've made throughout history is, why do we have all these things going on? Now, I understand and I have given the Christian answer to that, but it's not an easy answer. I posted a picture the other day I reposted it on Facebook. It was a young black kid, Ethiopia, Africa, somewhere, but starving. You could see he's starving to death. It's one of the many children that live in these impoverished areas. When I was in Switzerland many years ago, maybe 20-something years ago now, I remember somebody mentioned it was beautiful, and I was there for 10 days, like in a ministry thing. But and we went to the Swiss Alps and all, but you hardly ever see the sun because of the way the clouds are there. And someone said that's why the depression and suicide rate was so high in Switzerland, because of the lack of the sun, vitamin D you get from the sun. And my friend, I just posted a video. I'm uploading an old one from David Martin. David's smart, but I remember David said over the years he'd read things, as far as I know it's true. He said out on the West Coast, California, you don't have so many people that are seeking methamphetamine or whatever, or the depression, because of the lithium that's in the water, naturally. But in areas of the country or world where the lithium is low, you have this, people go through depression and so forth. One time I looked to see if I could buy lithium just legally, like as a vitamin, but just like a few years ago. And so I think, so the people in Switzerland, many of them that are growing up, spending their whole lives, some taking their lives, killing themselves, it's because they happen to have been, and that's just so happens they're in a, so the Odyssey says, isn't that a strange thing? We've just had, even today, there was like a killing somewhere around the nation, another tragic thing that happened. They said, well, he was mentally unstable. One of my other friends mentioned once, and this is fitting in with the Odyssey, okay? It would sure be hard to answer somebody and say, oh yeah, you grew up your whole life, maybe as a child, in an impoverished country, and you starved. You died when you were 12 or 13, no fault of your own. And I know the arguments, okay, to say, and I'm not blaming anybody, I'm saying that it makes you think about things. And people that have had some severe things happen in their lives, loved ones dying and so forth, and tragically kids being shot, and that's called evil, that's called sin. But then they do diagnosis and say, oh, this person had a chemical imbalance, and so we're going to, and in some cases these things affect people. We know that today, medical science. So the Odyssey was simply saying, that sure would be strange. I remember, came to my mind right now, as a matter of fact, I get some of the old North Bergen pictures when I'm up in New York and North Bergen, New Jersey. He has since died, but when I used to visit with my friend Danny, who also died, there was an old man, forget his name now, but he was 90-something, and his wife was 90-something. I think he was just under 100. His name was Abe. And Abe, Danny, my friend, he liked to introduce me to interesting people. That's Danny right up here. He also passed away. So Abe owned all those properties where the Burger King is and a little strip mall right there where I hang out. He was a real estate investor. But Abe had some very interesting stories because I think they called it a partisan. But during World War II, he was Jewish, obviously, but he fought against the Nazis. Maybe he was in Poland, but he met his wife, and they were going to do a PBS documentary. I don't have the picture of Abe. Now, Abe has also since passed away. But Danny would introduce me to this older Jewish man who, had some great history. They did a documentary on Abe. And he would say, John's a preacher, and so I try to be nice. But Abe also studied at one point in his life in a rabbinical university, like he was going to be a rabbi at one point. And so as we talked, he mentioned maybe the book of Esther, something, not a test, and I kind of reviewed it and told him the story, either Esther or Ruth or something. Then I did say, I said, somehow we get into it, but I got to Yeshua HaMashiach, which is Jesus the Christ. And so I gave Abe, but he said this one thing. Though he believed in God, and was even going to say, but he said, then he said at one point, he said, how could there be a God? Because remember now, he went through the Holocaust, though he was not, as far as I know, he was not a Holocaust survivor. But he said, and all the children that died, and all the innocent victims of a madman. And that's what Abe said. Now I continued to talk to him in a short period of time. But it was what he's seen, the plight of humanity. All of these things going on right now in this country and the sexual stuff that's coming out. You say, so many of these cases that we're seeing in the media. And so there's this thing within humanity when it crosses boundaries. The sex drive itself. And then people sitting, rightfully so. I have a friend of mine here. I got his picture up there. He was in some of my meetings. Younger kid. I got him right there. I won't even show his picture. But kidnapped a young girl a few years ago. Just put her on methanol. So all of these things that we see in society, we see all of these, and I'll just do this one update, just like a live update, okay? We pray for all of these cases that are going on, all of these situations. These things are serious things that are happening within society, within our world. When you think of Job in the Bible, the book of Job, and we do understand at the end of the story, the man was afflicted, his family was killed, all these things happening to Job. And then at the end, of course, God restored a lot to Job. But at one point his wife says to Job, curse God and just die. And there are many people, when we see people that have just taken their lives, but there are many people, we don't justify that. I'm sober, for 5 years now. Almost. But you realize people are self-medicating, whether it's alcohol or whatever. And even we don't justify substance abuse. But I'm seeing that there's people that are dealing even with physiological issues, that they're going for certain things to get better. And so, sadly, we have the cases of people that just say, no, we're going to end this now. I saw a quote on Facebook when I was checking it. It was from Carl Jung, J-U-N-G. I think I had something on him at one time. It was just somebody put a quote, but it talked about, the struggle or the battle between flesh and spirit. And I didn't make a comment, but the comment was going to be, that's why some people commit suicide, because they said, we're going to finally put an end to that particular aspect of the sinful nature. That's what some are doing. That's what some are doing. And we don't justify it, nor do we say, ever give that as an option. But that's what some are doing. I saw that. I pray for the prisoners a lot. I thought, why are some of these guys hanging themselves in the prison? And I realized, I said, whatever situations they struggled with in life, rightfully got convicted, if it was a rightful conviction, sitting in prison, and then their minds still gravitating to whatever that happened to have been. And then sitting in a cell with even thinking that they've been held captive. And so they say, we now will take the risk, which we don't recommend or say is right risk or any of that. But that's what they do. Look at Aaron Hernandez, who wrote John 3:16 on his cell. And then they studied his brain later. I think it was Aaron Hernandez. So there's Theodicy. It means the question of evil. Why does evil exist? That's what that means. We know the Christian answer, and I don't want to give it all right now. But people look at it. People in Switzerland dealing with like I explained, simply because they're living in a region of the world, beautiful region, but the sun doesn't get through. And so for the lack of vitamin D, 60 years, 70 years, 80 years, struggling, depression, kids killing themselves at higher rates, all because of that. Yes, those are things that we understand the sovereignty of God. God's in charge. But when you look at the situation of humanity, people do ask. Abe asked. I tried to witness to Abe of Jesus Christ. That's what Yahshua HaMashiach is from Hebrew. And I gave some, I think he appreciated that I was knowledgeable about whatever book of the Bible he mentioned. And then I went through that story with him that day. So we continue to testify. But we look at the reality of things that are going on. So this will be the live update for tonight. I got a teaching post tomorrow.